And let's be careful about, MAGA flamethrower, right? Self-described white nationalist is what you said?
And Islamophobe.
Islamophobe and 9/11 truther, right? So
all of those things. There was a moment in 2015, 2016 for Donald Trump and the Republican Party to say, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, white nationalists, anti-Semites, quacks and conspiracy theorists, you're not welcome.
It's been culturally codified at this point. I mean, you have someone talking to the president, not just chumming around, not just had a dinner, but going to the White House and delivering advice to the president that he then acts on, who is an avowed white nationalist.
Unless you are Laura Loomer, who, as we've established, is questionable at best in terms of her judgment.
I disagree because I think...
Hello, everybody. Guys, let's get right into this topic. We talked about this a few days ago, but CNN did another segment on it, which I appreciate because I think it's really important. Let's get into it and we'll talk about it more because I have a lot to say about this.
Welcome back. As we talk about who has the president's ear on economic issues, it appears that a far-right conspiracy theorist has his ear on national security decisions. You might remember Laura Loomer. She's described herself as a pro-white nationalist and a proud Islamophobe. She entertains conspiracies about everything, including 9/11 being an inside job. And despite that, Donald Trump took her to visit Lower Manhattan to mark the September 11th attacks last year. Well, this week, she's made another trip, this one to the White House, where apparently she told Trump that members of his national security team were disloyal. Hours later, he fired half a dozen of them, including the man in charge of the nation's cyber intelligence. So the question this morning is America's national security team in the hands of a 31-year-old MAGA flamethrower? And what else is Trump getting advice on, and from whom? This is confounding.
Wait a minute. She's only 31?
Well, that's a different conversation.
My bad.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that, yeah, Trump has the right to hire and fire, however, whenever, whatever. But most of these people, and I think this is what kind of gets me about this, there are people in the national security apparatus of this country, people who served in the military, people who have served in government, loyally to Democratic and Republican presidents, who are not thinking about politics when they are doing their jobs. And they serve regardless of administration. And those people were serving Trump just fine until Laura Loomer decided, oh, well, they worked under Joe Biden, so they've got to go.
In many cases, there were people who served in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
So this isn't even, nonpartisan civil servants being purged. And let's be careful about, MAGA flamethrower, right? Self-described white nationalist is what you said?
And Islamophobe.
Islamophobe and 9/11 truther, right? So I lived through 9/11 up close, right? So there was a time not that long ago that alone would have been the end of the conversation. But this person
it should be the end of the conversation today.
Right. This isn't that she's kind of out there, but this person is actually marching to the White House, speaking to the president directly, and then he's acting on it by firing national security staff. That should make nobody feel good.
Well, you're leaving out a step,
what's the step, Scott?
Which is my understanding is that she did go to meet with him and presented him with rather basic vetting information about some of the staff and things they had said, maybe political contributions they had made, as evidence that perhaps they were not supportive of his agenda when it comes to national security. And it is the president's right to have the staff that's loyal to him.
Because the reason I brought this up about the...
Really quickly, what qualification does Laura Loomer have to be vetting anyone, especially with these kind of views? I mentioned this in my previous video. She called Kamala Harris a DEI Shaniqua. Really? You don't think there's an issue with someone like this having the ear of the president? Not that we're shocked or surprised, but there's an overarching issue here that I want to get into. They touch on it a bit, but let's finish this out.
People who just work on national security issues and they don't have an R or a D stamped on their foreheads. Two of the people, and she tweeted about this today, two of the people, she said that they were disqualified only because they had worked under the prior administration, under Joe Biden. And that makes no sense because there are many people who work in the government over long periods of time, and they work under Democrats and Republicans. They might have worked under Trump and then Biden and then Trump again. That is not enough reason to fire someone unless you are Laura Loomer, who, as we've established, is questionable at best in terms of her judgment.
I disagree because I think White House staff key White House staff, presidential advisors, are different than mid-level bureaucrats at some far-flung agency.
But you know that
And if you're-
national security staff, you know this because you've worked in the White House, that national security staff, a lot of them do stay on regardless of administration
true.
because they are detailed from the Pentagon into the national security apparatus so that there is continuity.
It's true.
That's why that happens.
It's true, but it's also true that the president wants to know and deserves to know whether the people who are staffing him on any issue actually support his agenda. That's the thing. By the way, I'll just bring up the phrase, pleasure of the president. When you work in these jobs, that's what you got to have. And you either have it or you don't. Right now, these people don't have it. It's his right to have the staff that he wants. And, you know, that's why we elect presidents, to hire and fire teams and make decisions.
I think that part of it, to me, is so unsurprising. And actually that bothers me less. I'll just make a broader point. There was a moment in 2015, 2016 for Donald Trump and the Republican Party to say, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, white nationalists, anti-Semites, quacks and conspiracy theorists, you're not welcome in my movement. I don't want to be associated with you. He didn't. He said, come one, come all. If you like me, that's enough cost of entry. That gets you into the party. And then conservatism and the Republican Party sort of swallowed these people up and morphed into this MAGA movement. And that part is so bothersome to me, more than he fired some people at the recommendation. It's that Laura Loomer associates herself with conservatism and the Republican Party. That is so awful.
And Trump calls her a great patriot.
Yes, and that is associated with the movement that I found so empowering that I joined it at 18. Well, you know, that's the part that bothers me.
It's been.
I don't agree with maybe even half of the things that S.E. Cupp says from time to time, but I completely agree with her. And this is why I try to speak up to Republicans at least a bit in my videos, because I don't believe 100% of Republicans are racist. But I think it's important to show the connections. And if you're completely grossed out by that, again, if you hate what Democrats stand for, you don't have to vote for them. But do you have to vote for this guy who's a clear racist, white nationalist, just the most vile person ever? And I think I have to make this clear, which I mean, I don't see why I should, but I think it makes sense to make it clear. If we lived in an alternate universe, guys, where white people were being disenfranchised or marginalized in some way, one way or another, constantly attacked, I would be here fighting for you too. If there are people out there actively working to harm any group of people, I think it's important to push back as much as possible. And honestly, I wish there were more. And I talk about unity amongst people of color because I think obviously the parallels are clear to me. If you're a racist, you don't just hate black people. You likely hate Hispanics too, and Arabs, and you probably hate women and have this view of women, right? It is all together. You're probably anti-Semitic. All these things are connected. And I think it's important for people to see a Hispanic like I am fighting for black people, and push back on your Hispanic people on some of their racist views. That it's like forbidden language to talk about it. I think it gives it more weight and can possibly change some people's hearts and mind. Just like I believe it's important for white people to do the same for people of color, as it gives it more weight amongst their people. Right? I think there's just many people that just plainly see it a little bit more selfishly. Well, they're talking about DEI, and that mainly affects, they're only using that to attack black people. That doesn't really bother me, right? Or they're talking about illegal immigrants, and they're kind of, they're treating them like, terribly, but I'm not Hispanic, so what do I care? And that kind of dissociation aids the racism and bigotry in this movement to normalize it. And it makes it easier for the next group of people to be attacked. It may not be you today, but it will be you tomorrow. I have more to say, but let's finish this out.
Codified. It's been culturally codified at this point. I mean, you have someone talking to the president, not just chumming around, not just had a dinner, but going to the White House and delivering advice to the president that he then acts on, who is an avowed white nationalist. Terrifying. Terrifying to the point that I thought he had to be flooding the zone, that this had to be something that he was doing to take our minds and the talking points away from the tariffs and the bad week that he had, and it had to be some sort of stunt. But the more that I think about it, it doesn't matter whether it is or whether it's not. This is the worst fear of a lot of people who, just to be honest with you, were gaslit and told that there was no connection between Donald Trump and white nationalism, that there was no connection between Donald Trump and these far-right people that you're talking about right now. And we were lied to. They're in the White House, they're talking to the president, and he's listening.
There's nothing off limits anymore.
Nothing.
And toward the end of the first Trump term, it was the Sidney Powells of the world and the Rudy Giulianis. They were scaring even the most dyed-in-the-wool Trump people because of how loony they were in that time. And now it seems nobody is saying anything at all. But that's where we are. Coming up next is...
And yeah, guys, I've had people say, oh, yes, we get it. The Republicans are racist. Who cares? Laura Loomer is racist. Who cares? Let's move forward. Really? Do you really think that's how you make a dent on something? You need to push back as much as possible against this stuff. It has a way of marinating, becoming more and more normalized. Don't you see it? Don't you feel it since 2016? How much more normalized it's becoming? It's because there's more on that side. There's more racism coming from that side so consistently and relentlessly than those fighting against it. At least that's the way I see it. You don't just sit out and just wait for things. Like, guys, think about this. Do you think Martin Luther King Jr., if he was here today, that he would say something like, yeah, the Republicans are racist, but no need to talk about it anymore. Let's move forward with the next thing. Let's just wait it out. Change doesn't come sitting around and just waiting for something to happen. You have to make it happen. And guys, I fight back. Mainly, 90% of my videos are about racism. And I fight against it, mainly against black people, because it's by far, to me, the most prevalent, the most consistent, and has been going on for literally hundreds of years. And as a being on this planet, it simply embarrasses me and angers me. And, these issues with the economy and Social Security, all these things are very important to me. But things don't have to be binary. You can't talk about helping the working class and everyday people and having a fair opportunity at a decent life. So, oh yeah, but let's ignore all the racism coming from that side. Let's just ignore it. Just act like that's not happening and move on. And then ask those same people to vote for you in droves the next election when you weren't fighting for them, who will no doubt be negatively affected by the racism that you let permeate. And you said, oh, you know what? We get it. They're racist. Let's just move on. These things don't have to be binary. You can talk about the economy, Social Security, child care services. You could talk about all these things together. You could talk about racism. You can push back against these things. Guys, 45% of Hispanics voted for Trump. As a Hispanic, I see that as a massive problem. And if you think that Hispanics voted for Trump was purely based on the economy, then you don't understand my people the way I do. There's a lot, I've mentioned this before plenty of time. There's a lot of misogyny and racism within Hispanic cultures that is just completely ignored. It's forbidden words, I say. No one talks about it. No one likes talking about it. And I believe that played a huge part in getting Trump elected. And as a Hispanic, I think it's immensely important for me to call out my people and call them to stand with black people and all disenfranchised groups and explain how an attack on black people is an attack on us as well. These things are parallels. Racists hate Hispanics too. They don't just hate black people. They don't just hate Arabs. And I think it also should be said that even if you don't get affected by racism, as a decent human being, you should be at minimum not supportive of the party that pushes it and uses it as fear and uses it to scare the crap out of people with lies. But anyways, I spoke a lot. Again, sorry about that. I went on a rant there. But I just want to end it with this thought that I had earlier. Do we as people really want this kind of want society to be this kind of place where because someone is different than you in some way that it's okay to treat them like they're less than? Does that make sense? Or should we try our best to be a society where we understand each other's differences and maybe even help you get out of your own comfort zone and help you grow as a person? Doesn't that sound like something worth fighting for? But let me know what you think about all this in the comments. I do appreciate CNN making another segment about it because I think it's important, personally. Please subscribe if you haven't. It really helps out the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.